As we mentioned earlier on, Saladmaster is the world's smallest ovens. And to prove that fact, we're going to bake a cake on the hob.
Excellent. Okay, well, normally when you're baking a cake, you have, a lot of people got their own sorts of recipes.
That's right.
And in Saladmaster, you can use your own recipe. What we're going to share with you today is you're actually going to bake the cake with no oil, no butter, or no margarine.
Wow.
So if you had your own cake recipe that you're going to use at home, for every 100 grams of butter, oil or margarine, we just replace that with fruits or vegetables. You probably saw on the dinner presentation when you had it cooked for you that they use red cabbage, white cabbage, courgette, onions, etc.
They actually used everything that was in the salad.
They used everything that was in the salad. And the reason that we do that on the dinner presentation is because actually we're using a chocolate cake mix.
Right.
So let's say, for example, you're going to do like a white sponge. You wouldn't want to add the red cabbage or the courgette or anything with a lot of colour because it would speckle throughout the cake mix.
Right.
So what you then use is you'd use some apple or some pear or some banana.
Wow.
But the mixture ratio is for every 100 grams of butter, margarine or oil, we replace that with 100 grams of fruits or vegetables. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now we're going to use half the cake mix today. The reason we're going to use half the cake mix is we're going to actually bake the cake inside the small skillet. If you were going to do the cake inside the large skillet, you use the whole cake mix.
Right.
And really what I want to share is that you could bake a cake in this 1 quart, the small skillet, the 3 quart. You could even bake a cake in the 16 quart.
Wow.
I remember my wife made a cake for my daughter's birthday in the wok, in the 5 quart wok. Turned it upside down and the shape of the wok made a dress. And then she put a dollop on top of there. So any piece of cookware you can use for any type of cooking. We're just going to use this one for the cake today.
Good.
So we're just going to use half the cake mix. So here we've got half the cakes mixed in the Saladmaster bowl. And really all we're using this cake mix for, Victoria, is we're using it for the cocoa, the bicarb and the flour.
Right.
So you could use your own ingredients. Let's say if you want to do a white cake or a chocolate cake, that's the ingredients. That's the reason we're using the cake mix.
Good.
Now we need to add our vegetables. The quantity of vegetables for half of the cake mix is a cup full of vegetables. This could be red cabbage, white cabbage, courgette. All we've got here is cabbage, carrot and apple. But the quantity for half of the cake mix is a cup full of grated vegetables, and whatever grated vegetables that you want.
All right.
So the recipe actually calls for 3 eggs for the whole box.
Yeah.
We're going to be using half the cake mix. So I'm not sure how to do 1.5 eggs. So we'll use 2 eggs instead of 1.5. So if you wouldn't mind mixing that for me, please.
Absolutely.
Victoria. Now, again, normally if you're going to be making a cake, you would need to grease the pan. This is the small skillet. This is the one we're going to be using for the cake today. But instead of greasing the pan or putting oil into the pan, what we're going to do is just use a little bit of apple. Now, if you wanted to, so again, we're replacing our fats and oils with fruits. If you wanted to, you could put on the bottom here peaches, plums, strawberries, mango, banana, anything that when it caramelizes, it will allow it'll allow the cake to release from the cookware. And you don't need to, just a very fine, thin layer. If you were going to normally bake a cake in the oven, you'd use some, to line the cake pan, you'd put some butter in there, spray some butter or use some parchment paper or greaseproof paper. What we're going to do, we're going to replace our fats and oils with fruit. And I'm just going to use some apple in here today. If you wanted to, again, you could use parchment paper inside the cookware, but I'm just going to use a little bit of apple. Now, again, it doesn't have to be apple. It could be some layer of banana on there or some pineapple or some strawberries or some fruit. Anything that you want. So we're replacing our oils and we're replacing them with fruits. Any fruit that you want, you can just line the bottom of the cookware just before you put the cake in.
Wow. Good.
You've got the cake mix in there, Victoria?
Yep.
That's it, it's ready to go. You don't need to smooth it out, you don't need to level it out. Once it starts to warm, the cake mix will spread and that's going to fill the whole piece of cookware there.
Brilliant.
Now what I really like, Victoria, and I think a lot of people do, with energy conservation, normally if you were baking a cake, you'd be baking a cake this small in an oven this big.
True.
In Saladmaster, we're making a cake this big in an oven this big. It's good, isn't it?
Very good. So now let's just do a quick recap on stovetop baking. Okay, now you saw the demonstration earlier on with the cake. Remember, Saladmaster is like having mini ovens. So you can cook, we use the cake as an example, but you can cook anything, just that you cook in an ordinary oven, like your lasagnas, maybe your macaroni pie, maybe you're someone that loves to do pasta bakes. All of these things that you would ordinarily cook in your oven, you can cook in Saladmaster, but this time on top of the stove. So let's go back to the cake method. If normally you might say, but Victoria, when I cook my cakes, I normally, use butter
or
parchment paper. Exactly. You can still use a parchment paper, but what we'd suggest is if you could get perhaps a 1-cal or fry light spray, they call it. You can spray the inside, lightly spray that, or what I've done in the past is I've used some kitchen towel and some coconut oil, which is a really healthy oil to cook with, and I've just wiped the inside of my skillet. Then what you do is you preheat, maybe for 2 to 3 minutes, and then when that's ready, take the lid off, put the mixture straight in. You don't have to smooth it out or anything. Lid back on, and then it's the difference with stovetop baking as opposed to ordinary cooking. This time you start at a low heat, so medium to low is where you start. So if it's electric, we're probably looking around about the 1 and 2. The same with gas.
And you can obviously check it as you go through the cooking process as well, can't you? I mean, in a normal oven, if you open up the oven door, the cake would flop. But in Saladmaster, actually, you can check it. You can see that it's cooked, and if it's not, if you get any water residue on the top there, just shake off the water residue so the cake doesn't collapse, and then put it back on, and you can check it throughout the cooking process, can you?
That's right.